After my sister lied about me, Dad threw out my stuff and my kids' stuff and said, "Get out of my house." My sister laughed. "Good luck surviving, loser." We just walked away. What they didn't know was that in 3 days, karma would hit harder than they could ever imagine. I'll never forget the way my dad looked at me that night. Not with anger, not even disappointment. Just cold. Like I was nothing. It's the kind of look you don't expect from your own father, especially when you're standing there holding your toddler's hand with nowhere to go. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't plan on living back at my parents' house at 32 with a 3-year-old and no job. Life had collapsed faster than I could rebuild it, and the only lifeline I had left was them. We'd moved in 2 months earlier. Just temporary, I said. Just until I could get a new job, save some money, figure out daycare. My mom welcomed me like she always did. But Monica, my sister, didn't even pretend to hide her disgust. She was already living there with her husband and their daughter after some failed house deal. So now it was 3 families under one roof, and one of us clearly wasn't wanted. From the first week, she made it known how unfair it was that Mom cooked for me too or watched my son when I went to job interviews. She'd comment loud enough for me to hear, asking her husband if maybe we should quit our jobs too so we can get room service and free babysitting. I ignored it. I kept my head down, helped around the house, and did everything I could not to stir anything up. But Monica doesn't let things go. She couldn't stand that our parents were giving me any attention, especially financial. I could feel her resentment like static in the air. What I didn't know was how far she'd go to get rid of me. The day it happened started like any other. I took my son out to the park after breakfast to get out of everyone's way. When I got back, something was off. The house was too quiet. My mom stood in the kitchen, not even looking at me. Then I saw my dad coming out of my room holding an envelope like it was evidence in a trial. He didn't yell. He didn't ask a single question. He said, "You stole from us. Get out of my house." My first reaction was to laugh. I thought it was a misunderstanding. But then I saw Monica, arms crossed behind him, barely hiding her smirk. She said she found the missing emergency cash in my dresser drawer while looking for her hairbrush. It was over $10,000. I couldn't even form words. I said it wasn't mine, that I didn't touch it. But no one was listening. Dad grabbed a trash bag and started shoving my things into it. He dumped my son's toys in like garbage. My mom just stood there, silent, which somehow hurt more than if she'd screamed. I told them to check fingerprints, cameras, anything. Monica chimed in that I was just trying to buy time to sneak out with the money. Her husband watched from the hallway, clearly enjoying the show. They kicked us out. Just like that. As I stood outside holding my son's jacket and a ripped bag of clothes, Monica leaned out the front door and said, "Good luck surviving, loser." And they closed the door. It was almost 9 p.m. I had no plan, no car, and maybe $40 in my purse. I walked to the bus stop with my son crying in my arms, his stuffed bear left behind in the chaos. I felt numb. Then I did the one thing I never wanted to do. I called Uncle Rick. He answered on the second ring. Rick was my dad's older brother. He was the successful one. Big house, no kids, divorced, private golf club membership. I hadn't seen him much over the past year, but I remembered how kind he'd been to me growing up. I told him everything. Every ugly detail. He didn't even hesitate. He said, "Come stay with me." I didn't ask questions. I took the next bus across town and showed up at his gate just before midnight. I didn't know it then, but that night was the beginning of something none of them saw coming. In 3 days, everything would start to fall apart for Monica and my parents. And karma was just getting started. Uncle Rick's house didn't feel real the first night. It was almost midnight by the time I arrived, dragging 2 trash bags filled with wrinkled clothes and a toddler half asleep on my shoulder. The lights from his porch spilled out over the stone driveway like something out of a movie. Everything was neat, calm, the exact opposite of the chaos I'd just left. He opened the door, saw my face, looked at my son, and didn't ask a single question. He just reached out, picked up my boy, and told me, "You're safe now." That was the first time I let myself cry. He let me sleep. No questions, no judgment. The next morning, he made pancakes and didn't even blink when my son spilled syrup across the counter. He poured me a cup of coffee, sat down, and asked what happened. I didn't leave anything out. Not Monica's little digs from the moment I moved in. Not the weird tension that started growing every time my parents helped me out. I told him about the job I lost, the interviews I'd gone to, how I was trying, how I hated needing help. And then I told him what happened that night, how my dad found the emergency money in my drawer, how Monica stood there pretending to be shocked. I even told him what she said as the door closed in my face. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned back, rubbed his chin, and said something I didn't expect. "I've been waiting for something like this." I asked him what he meant, and he told me he always had a bad feeling about Monica. That he'd seen this mean streak in her since she was a teenager, but she'd always been careful to play innocent when it mattered. He also said my parents had been making questionable financial decisions lately, pulling more from the family business than they should, ignoring budget meetings and suddenly asking for small loans like nothing was wrong. And then he picked up the phone and made a call right in front of me. I didn't hear everything, but I caught a few words. Freeze access, family dividends, audit starting today. He hung up, looked at me and said, "You don't have to prove anything. Just wait." The truth has a habit of punching hard when it finally lands. The next 2 days were quiet, almost too quiet. I helped around the house, took my son out to the garden and tried not to think about what Monica was probably saying about me back at home. I imagined her holding court in the living room, playing the victim, spinning stories about how she caught me red-handed. I knew my mom would be crying. I knew my dad wouldn't care. He hadn't hesitated when he threw me out. But Rick? He was planning something. I didn't know what, but I could feel it. He was on the phone constantly, and every time I asked if something had happened he'd just say soon. On the third day he came home in the early afternoon, tossed his keys on the counter and told me to get dressed. "We're going to visit your parents," he said. I didn't want to go. I told him there was no point. They made it clear what they thought of me. But he wasn't asking. He just said it's time they saw who they chose to believe over their own daughter. When we pulled into the driveway, Monica's SUV was there. My mom's car too. No sign of my dad's truck. The front door was slightly open, like someone had walked out in a hurry and forgot to close it. Rick told me to stay in the car with my son. He said this part wasn't for me. Then he got out and walked up the steps like he owned the place. I stayed in the back seat holding my son's hand, heart racing. From the car I couldn't see much, but I could hear it. The door slammed and then shouting. Monica's voice first, loud and frantic. Then my mom's crying. At one point I heard a thud like something fell. And then the one thing I'll never forget. Silence followed by Monica screaming something that pierced through the window. "You can't do that. You can't just cut us off." A few minutes later Rick walked out. Calm, focused. Like he'd just closed a deal. I asked him what happened and he told me just like that the audit came through. He'd uncovered something Monica never thought anyone would look for. A matching withdrawal from the family business account the day before the cash disappeared. Same amount, same envelope. She took money from the company to pay a personal debt, then moved it into my room to cover her tracks. She wasn't just trying to get rid of me, she was trying to bury her own screw-up. Rick said they're cut off. Effective immediately. No more access to family money, no more dividends. They can figure out how to pay the mortgage on their own. I couldn't speak. All I could think about was how they'd looked at me like trash, tossed me and my son out like we were nothing. And now they were the ones watching their world start to collapse. The best part? They had no idea this was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up before the sun and sat by the window in the guest room, watching the fog roll over Uncle Rick's backyard. My son was still asleep, curled up with one of the stuffed animals Rick had bought him. I just sat there for a while, not thinking, not planning, just breathing. I hadn't done that in months. By the time Rick came home that afternoon, I already had 3 missed calls from Monica and 1 text from my mom that simply said, "Please, can we talk?" That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just a message as empty as the space I used to sleep in at their house. Rick glanced at my phone and said, "Don't answer anything. Let them come to you now." He was in good spirits, more than usual. I followed him into his office and he gave me a quick rundown. Turns out, cutting off their access to the family business was only step 1. He'd initiated a full audit of the household budget after noticing discrepancies in past reports. The numbers were off by thousands. Money withdrawn under vague labels, expenses logged under the company name that clearly had nothing to do with work. Monica's fingerprints were all over it. That wasn't even the best part. Rick smiled as he pulled up the security footage. He told me he'd remembered installing a discreet camera in the hallway near the bedrooms after a family heirloom disappeared during a party last year. No one ever confessed. But this time that camera caught everything. Monica walking into my room, envelope in hand, looking both ways like a cartoon villain. She opened my drawer, tucked it in and left. No hesitation. She knew exactly what she was doing. Rick paused the video and asked, "You want me to send this to them? Or do you want to keep it as leverage?" I didn't even need to think. I told him to wait. Let them sweat. Let them wonder if I'd found proof. Let them lie awake at night trying to keep the story straight. By the end of that day, things started unraveling fast. Rick got a call from the family accountant asking why Monica had tried to authorize a wire transfer from a frozen account. She was panicking, trying to pull money before it all locked down. Too late. Then came the real blow. The contractors at my parents' house walked off the job. The kitchen renovation stopped mid-tiling. Half the new appliances were never delivered. The pool Monica had been bragging about on Facebook? The payment didn't clear. Everything they were using to build their little dream life was tied to business distributions Rick had full control over, and he'd shut every tap. Monica called me again that night. 6 times in a row. No voicemails. Then her husband tried. His message was one long guilt trip about how family needs to stick together and how maybe this whole thing got a little out of hand. I didn't reply. Rick made us dinner that night and didn't bring any of it up. He just asked my son how many dinosaurs he could name, and the two of them spent the evening drawing velociraptors on napkins. I realized then just how starved I'd been for something that felt normal. But the next day things shifted again. My mom showed up. She didn't ring the bell. She just stood outside the gate looking up at the house like she didn't know if she was allowed to walk closer. I watched her from the upstairs hallway, hidden behind the curtain. She looked tired. Not just in the way people look after a long day, but broken, like something inside her had cracked and she wasn't sure how to hold it together anymore. She stood there for maybe 10 minutes before walking back to her car and driving off. Later that night, Rick handed me his phone. Monica had texted him, of all people. 3 words. She ruined everything. I laughed. Not because it was funny but because of the irony. Monica had burned down her own house, then tried to blame me for the fire. She hadn't even begun to feel the consequences. And she still didn't know we had the footage. I sat back, held my son close, and thought about the last time I felt like I had a choice in anything. No, the choices were all mine. 2 days passed. No calls. No texts. Not even a passive-aggressive message from Monica. Just silence. But not the peaceful kind. This kind of silence always comes before something breaks. I'd lived with Monica long enough to know she didn't just let things go. She didn't accept consequences, she dodged them, redirected them, blamed them on someone else. And if that didn't work, she'd twist the narrative until the damage looked like someone else's fault entirely. So when nothing came through for 2 days, I knew something was boiling under the surface. It didn't take long for it to bubble over. Thursday morning, I was sitting on Rick's back patio watching my son chase butterflies across the lawn, when Rick came outside holding a manila envelope like it was contaminated. He raised an eyebrow and said, "It's from your parents." Inside were 3 typed pages. From my father. The tone was so different it was almost laughable. He didn't apologize, not once. Instead, it was this awkward blend of concern and subtle blame. He wrote about how complicated things had gotten, how misunderstandings can sometimes get out of hand, and how he regretted how things unfolded. No mention of throwing his daughter and grandson out with garbage bags. No mention of standing behind Monica's fake story. No acknowledgement of what they'd actually done. But that wasn't the point of the letter. Not really. Halfway through page 2 he got to what he really wanted. Money. He said the accounts were temporarily tied up, and it would mean a lot if Rick would reconsider releasing their monthly distribution, just until we sort through some personal matters. That was the phrase he used. Some personal matters. Rick handed me the letter like it smelled bad. He didn't even seem mad, just unimpressed. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The silence was enough. Later that night it escalated. I was upstairs folding laundry while my son napped when I heard the front gate buzz. Rick went to check, then called out to me a minute later. It was Monica. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching her through the front door window as Rick let her in. She walked in like she was trying to keep it together but failing miserably. Her usual perfection, polished hair, flawless makeup, that smug posture, was gone. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She started talking the second she stepped into the living room. She said things were bad. That the contractors had walked off the house renovation. That her husband's job was in trouble because Rick had quietly informed their business partners about the misuse of company funds. She said their credit cards were locked, the accountant had stopped answering her calls, and Mom wasn't even speaking to her anymore. She said Dad blamed her. For everything. For the audit, the frozen money, the ruined family reputation. Even for losing access to the country club. She said she couldn't breathe anymore, that her whole life was falling apart. And then she did the one thing I never expected. She confessed. Right there in Rick's living room, Monica admitted to everything. She said she took the money from the family account. That she planted it in my drawer. That she waited for the perfect time to discover it. She said she wanted me gone. That she'd had enough of hearing Mom talk about how strong I was being, or watching Dad slip me grocery money while pretending it was no big deal. She said she was tired of feeling like the invisible one. That even though she was married, employed, and living under their roof, she still felt like the second daughter. Like she was the backup plan. Then she looked at me and said she didn't think it would go that far. That she never meant for Dad to actually throw me and my son out. That she was just angry. Just trying to get me to leave. I didn't say a word. Neither did Rick. We just let her talk. Let her unravel. And when she finally looked up at us, exhausted and waiting for a reaction, Rick walked over to his desk and opened a file. Inside was a still frame from the security footage. Monica caught mid-motion, planting the envelope in my drawer. He slid it across the table without a word. Monica stared at it for a long time. She didn't even bother pretending. She just asked, "You've had this the whole time?" Rick nodded. Said we'd been watching and waiting. Not because we needed revenge, but because sometimes it's better for people to destroy themselves before you even lift a finger. She looked at me again. This time really looked. And she asked what I wanted. I told her I didn't want anything from her. Not money. Not forgiveness. Not some desperate attempt to fix what she broke. Because it wasn't about what she did to me anymore. It was about what she did to herself. I walked out of the room back upstairs and closed the door behind me. My son was still asleep. Peaceful. Meanwhile, downstairs, Monica was finally learning what it felt like to lose everything she thought she controlled. And Rick? He hadn't even played his final card yet. Monica didn't come back after that day. She left Rick's house without another word, got into her car and peeled off like someone trying to outrun her own shadow. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought she'd crawl back to my parents' house and try to patch things up behind closed doors, pretend none of this ever happened. I was wrong. Because she didn't just break down that day. Something in her snapped completely. The next evening, Rick got a call from my mom. This time he answered it on speaker. I sat next to him at the kitchen table just listening. She sounded wrecked. Not angry, not dramatic, just defeated. She said Monica hadn't spoken to anyone since she left our house. Said Dad had been storming around, blaming everyone but himself, and now even the extended family had started asking questions. Someone from the board had leaked the audit. Word was spreading fast. Then she asked, "Can we all sit down? As a family?" I didn't respond right away. I was still angry, still numb. But Rick looked at me and said, "You don't have to go. But if you do, you go on your terms. Not theirs." I nodded. Told her I'd come. She said they were putting together a family dinner. Everyone invited. Monica, her husband, my parents, me, Rick. Even Aunt Sheila, who lived 2 hours away, was going to be there. That alone told me something big was happening. The night of the dinner, I wore the same outfit I had on the night my father kicked me out. A small, petty detail only I would notice, but it gave me strength. Rick drove us there, calm as ever. My son stayed with one of Rick's friends for the evening. I didn't want him near any of it. We pulled into the driveway and I noticed something immediately. Monica's car wasn't parked in its usual polished spot out front. It was off to the side near the edge of the grass, like she didn't want it to be seen. The porch light was out. The front door was open. Inside, the house looked dimmer than I remembered. The kitchen renovation had stalled halfway through. No tile on the backsplash. Cabinets unfinished. A stack of unpaid invoices sat on the entry table in plain view. For once, no one was pretending everything was perfect. Everyone was already seated at the long dining table when we walked in. Aunt Sheila was there, arms crossed, looking like she'd just come to collect evidence. Monica's husband looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years. And my dad? He wouldn't look at me at all. I sat across from Monica. No one said anything for a while. Then Rick cleared his throat and said, "We're here." That's when my mom spoke. She apologized. Not perfectly. Not all at once. But genuinely. She said she was ashamed of what had happened. That she believed the wrong person. That she let fear, pride, and favoritism guide her instead of doing what was right. And then she started crying. That's when Monica stood up. She didn't cry. She didn't try to justify anything. She looked right at everyone and said what none of us expected. She admitted everything. She told the whole table what she'd done. That she'd taken the money from the business account. That she'd planted it in my drawer. That she'd framed me, lied to everyone, and let me and my son be thrown out of the house like garbage. She said she did it because she was jealous. Because she hated how everyone treated me like I was fragile and good while she was just the one who always had everything handled. She said she wanted to destroy me because it made her feel powerful. The table was silent. Aunt Sheila was the first to break it. He said, "And what now, Monica? What happens now that you've burned every bridge you had?" Monica didn't answer. Then my dad finally looked at me. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said he didn't know how to fix it. That he'd failed. That maybe this whole time he'd been more focused on control than on family. Then he asked if I would come home. Said they wanted me to move back in. Said they wanted to make things right. I stared at the table. At the woman who lied about me. At the father who believed her. At the mother who watched it all happen. And I said no. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And moving back in doesn't undo the night my son and I stood in the street with nothing. I thanked them for the invitation. But I told them I already had a home now. One where we were wanted. After I said no, it was like the room forgot how to breathe. My father, who had looked so certain a minute earlier, just sat there blinking like he'd misheard me. My mother looked down into her lap. Monica didn't even look surprised. She just stared at her plate like she was hoping the table would swallow her whole. No one spoke. No one argued. And that silence, it said more than anything they could have come up with. I didn't drag it out. I stood, thanked them for dinner, and told them I truly hoped they figured things out, but I wouldn't be part of the cleanup. I walked out with Rick behind me and never looked back. They didn't follow. No one stopped us at the door. And that was the moment I realized something I hadn't before. For the first time in my life, they needed me more than I needed them. On the drive home, Rick didn't say much. He just looked over at one point and said, "You handled that better than most people would have." I told him I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't care to belong to something that made me feel small. A few days later, he handed me a folder. Inside was Elise, his guest house. I hadn't been inside it before. It was tucked behind his garden, half hidden by trees and old hedges. 2 bedrooms, a clean little kitchen, a skylight in the living room. He told me if I wanted it, it was mine. No deadlines. No pressure. He'd cover the cost of repairs and give me the first year rent-free so I could get settled. I asked him why he was doing all this. He said, "Because I've watched you try to make it on scraps while the people who should have helped you were too busy keeping score. You don't owe me anything, but you do deserve a shot to breathe." I moved in 3 weeks later. My son picked the smaller bedroom for himself because it had a window facing the garden. Every morning now, he watches birds fly past the glass while he eats his cereal. He's smiling more, laughing more, sleeping soundly. Me. I found a part-time job working remotely for a small accounting firm. Not glamorous but stable. I'm building something. On my own terms. I haven't heard from Monica since the dinner. Last I heard through a cousin, she and her husband sold their SUV and moved into a cheaper rental while they figured out what to do next. The renovations at my parents' house were never finished. The contractors filed a complaint over unpaid invoices. The bank flagged something in my dad's business taxes, which Rick had apparently been warning him about for years. They're struggling. Quietly. Proudly. As always. They haven't reached out. I think part of them is still waiting for me to cave. To come back out of guilt or nostalgia, or that twisted sense of family loyalty that kept me tied to their chaos for so long. But that version of me doesn't exist anymore. The truth is, I didn't get revenge. I got freedom. I didn't expose Monica to the world. I didn't drag my parents through court or post the footage online. I didn't need to. Their lives unraveled all on their own. And the best part? I didn't lift a finger. Sometimes I still drive past that old house. Not out of spite. Just curiosity. My son doesn't recognize it. He asks who lives there now. I tell him some people we used to know. I don't carry anger anymore. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've healed. And healing doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means building something better anyway. So I let go. But I didn't go back. And I never will.